Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay and welcome to episode 151. I'm speaking with Pete Leonard, the hiring manager for Realtime UK. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
Okay, welcome to a brand new episode. So I'm really excited for this one. I got to sit down with Pete Leonard from Realtime UK, who is in charge of managing all the resources at Realtime UK. So although technically not the hiring manager, he's a lot more than that. But basically, we wanted to do an episode more around working at Realtime UK and just in the industry in general. There's a lot of really great insights into how to get a job and how to position yourself in the best light. So there's a lot of really cool information being shared throughout this episode. And Realtime UK is one of my favorite studios. They do a lot of amazing game cinematics, and these days, as well as doing other work, commercials, VR, you name it. And I thought it'd be really fun to sit down with Pete. We met briefly in Europe last year, a year before, I forget now, a while ago. And I thought it'd be really fun to catch up and just kind of dive into a lot of the insights that he's able to share around this subject that I think that we all can get a lot of value from. So before we dive into this episode, I want to quickly mention a couple of things. One is that if you go to the show notes, alanmckay.com/151, you'll be able to access all the key quotes, key insights, all the information that's been shared throughout this episode, links to Realtime UK's website, to their AMA as well, and everything else in between. On top of that, as I mentioned last episode, I have a new guide that I've been working quite hard on called the Ultimate Demo Reel Guide. And this was a book that I put together, which will be appearing on Amazon as well as Audible as an audiobook in the near future. And this book was written because of having looked around at all the information out there on how to build a demo reel. I felt like most of it not only was completely wrong, but also a lot of it was very damaging. And so I felt like I had to write a book specifically from the perspective of someone who actually does the hiring. And not only to point out how volatile the industry can be, and typically, especially these days, what happens when you send your reel in, just to change the expectations that a lot of us have, but also so that way we can use this to our advantage. There's a lot of things in there, from case studies on demo reels that have hit 1 million views and how to push your reel to go viral, on top of just how to position your reel in the best shade of light, get it in front of the right people. There's just so much really great information in there. And if you get it right now, I don't know if this will be the same in the future, but if you get the book right now, it's free, and you will also have the opportunity to download for free a 2-hour advanced masterclass on a lot of additional demo reel tactics. Now, I think that this is really exciting, and what the video goes through is covering everything from how to optimize your open rate. So when you send in your demo reel, how to ensure that you get your email clicked on. When you imagine there's a lot of people applying, not only do you typically have to go through an application form to apply for a job, but even if you were to send an email, getting your email clicked on, read, and even your link opened up isn't always as easy as it sounds, okay? I think that we all just assume that people are going to watch our reel just because we took the time to send it in. But on top of that, I go through a lot of steps on how to actually get anyone's email address, and going through a lot of really advanced tactics to be able to pull any person's email address at any studio. And on top of that, building an outreach system so that way you can generate hundreds of leads every month and start to build relationships with a lot of key people. There's other things I get into, really creepy things that you'll be shocked that are even possible, such as when you send your reel in, I think that we all kind of feel that, like, did they open it? Did they get it? You'll be able to actually track whether someone actually opened your email and if they clicked on the link and watched the reel. And if they watched your reel if they watched it all the way through or if they stopped somewhere along the way. I always say that everything is data. And in other words, like if you really want to get into the guts of this stuff, and I think that all of us should, what you want to be focusing on is building out the entire process to the point where you get 100% success rate. In other words, when you start sending out your reels, you know that they're going to hit the mark and they're going to get you the job. So if you were to send out your reel to 5 studios, 10 studios, and you notice that they all tend to stop watching around the same time, then it's pretty easy to tell that there's something going on with your reel at that point that you need to tweak. Removing a shot, clarifying something, whatever it might be. But knowing this, knowing that people are actually stopping your reel or whatever it might be around that point, I think is really critical. Even just pausing on certain points, it's like, great, what is it that is attracting them? The more that you have this data, the more that you can optimize and tweak your reel. And once you are getting the right results, that's when you can start sending it out to the masses. So I think that this is really important to do. It might sound absurd, but like I said, trying to optimize your title of your email body, to get open rates, click-through rates, getting people to watch and engage with your reel, all of these things is really critical. And all of this data can actually be accessed. And on top of that, and this is where it gets ultra creepy, is let's say you had your reel and a breakdown list and other information all on a page. You can literally spy on someone's page when they're viewing it as a recording. You can watch, see where they clicked, if they stopped the reel, whether they rewound it a bunch of times, if they're scrolling down the page and looking through certain things, everything they're doing on the page. A, it sounds creepy as hell. B, I'm sure a lot of you will be like, yeah, right, like I don't believe you because just how creepy that is. But all I can say is in this video, I go through all this stuff. So I can literally see everything that they're doing as if I'm viewing their screen through a remote desktop. So there's a lot of tactics and advanced things that we get into, and all of this is information that we can use to better our opportunities. Being able to access anyone means that we don't need to go through a job application, submit our reel and everything else. And at that point, typically what happens is everything that we've done to stand out from the other 200 people applying for that job goes out the window. The HR person is typically who's going to look at your reel initially, put you into a database. By the time it lands in front of the right person, usually your cover letter and everything else is gone. It's going to be your reel, resume, name, and email. And so all the things that you've done to try and make yourself stand out have gone out the window. The money bribe that you slipped into the letter as well. I'm kidding. But, all the things that make you unique in terms of how you present yourself typically will be stripped down. And not only that, but usually when you're presented to the supervisor or whoever's going to be the decision maker, it's usually in a big spreadsheet of hundreds of other artists at that time. So keep that in mind, that by going through and doing the traditional way of applying for a job, you're going to be competing against many, many other people. And that's why episode 7 of the podcast, Breaking into the Industry Through the Side Door, was specifically around how to get around gatekeepers and more position yourself in a unique space where you get 100% of the attention when you're presenting your work. Because why put all this work into your demo reel to then be literally just another row on a spreadsheet? And I can guarantee if 200 people are applying for a job, there's going to be some pretty good people on there, just playing the statistics here. So this is a way to eliminate the competition and position yourself in the best way that you can communicate your skills and do everything yourself, rather than just being a demo reel on a spreadsheet, which may or may not get looked at. Because again, once they end up in the spreadsheet, when they get reviewed, I've seen so many times where a supervisor gets that spreadsheet and then they just hand it off to 3 or 4 other people to take a look at the reels when they get a chance and come back with their best 1 or 2, and then they'll review them together. So again, you got to think about how busy people are. Their job isn't to look at reels and hire people. Their job is to manage teams and manage deadlines, go to meetings and do shots themselves and everything else. So if they're that busy and then they got to look at reels as well, it's very easy to click through something. If a title at the very beginning with your name goes for a little bit too long, just turn off the reel and go to the next one. And a lot of this stuff we've talked about in previous episodes, like Kathleen Ruffalo was saying the exact same thing from Framestore in her episode about being respectful of our time, because again, if you make a really long reel or you have those bits that are hanging at the beginning on your name, things like that, it can get really frustrating when you've got so much stuff to go through and someone's not really thinking ahead about how to be efficient with your time. So I've seen so many people just turn off the reel and move to the next one so easily. So there's so many times in so many ways that this can be very volatile, and I want to point that out so that you see the importance in really trying to position yourself in the best light possible. Because why put all this effort in to then just have your reel get looked over because you weren't focusing on the presentation? Okay, so think about that. I think it's really critical. So that being said, if you go to alanmckay.com/ultimate demo reel or go to the show notes, you'll be able to see a link to it there. And like I said, you'll be able to access the advanced masterclass as well. It's free, all from that link. So I'll leave it there. Finally, there's also a guide to negotiating. So the artist guide to negotiating is up on the website as well. We've been working really hard at putting out a lot of content that is consolidated down to critical step-by-step information that you can apply to your career. So lots of really great resources at alanmckay.com. And like I said, all of this will be in the show notes, alanmckay.com/151. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, and I want to jump into this episode with Pete Leonard from Realtime UK. Thanks for taking the time, guys, to chat. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves really quick?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Pete Leonard, and basically I'm the guy who manages all resources here at Realtime UK. So I'm responsible for bringing in the permanent staff, managing our contractor function, freelancers that we work with, and any other third parties who may support us. Basically, anything to do with resourcing on the projects that we need, anything associated with that. That's what I do.
That's great. Cool. And do you want to quickly just talk about Realtime UK? I mean, just for anyone who's been living under a rock and isn't familiar with who you guys are.
Yeah, absolutely. So Realtime UK is a medium-sized studio here in the not so sunny northwest of England. We've been going we're just about to hit 22 years now. Specialist in high-end CG VFX and animation. And you can mainly find us, most of our work has been in game cinematics and in the automotive industry, but we also have done quite a lot of work in the last few years on real-time cinematics, VR, and also we've got some major stuff happening in the TV film space now as well. That's
really cool. Yeah, I was kind of surprised when you guys don't call yourself pre-rendered UK, but I guess now you can live up to the name. So actually, that's a good point, though. In terms of all the different mediums that you guys are moving into, is like VR, things like that, another area that you've been touching into?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of bits. There's quite a lot around that area that we can't talk too much about just because we're NDA'd up to the hill with clients. But the company's been doing a lot of its own investigation and R&D for a while into that area. At the moment we are doing work on the latest engines, doing VR demonstrations where we're basically pushing it as far as we can do. We are doing it in a couple of different industries, both on pre-rendered and also in automotive. And that's probably as much as I can say about it. It's a bit frustrating, but the one thing I will say is we've been able to get some really good results now, actually, in VR. In real time, we've been very happy with the fidelity and the quality that we've been able to reach. It's been quite a lot of work, but it's really talented. People who work here. That's one of the things I've always noted with Realtime UK, that for a medium-sized company, the quality of each individual artist here is really high. I mean, even your specialists in like one particular area, let's say like effects or lighting, they're really good in other areas like modeling, composition, effects, and those kind of things. People really are like high-level generalists here. So.
That's great. That's really good. And yeah, I'm going to loop back to that later because I'd love to kind of dive into the whole generalist versus specialist conversation at some point. But I guess just to talk a little bit about the studio, but like how bigger teams do you have working there?
It varies. I mean, we're about 40, 50 people at core, but we can increase up to anything from 10 to 50% depending on project requirements and the needs that we have. And as you can imagine, in a project-based industry, that can fluctuate quite a lot. So we have to employ quite a lot of dynamism where that's concerned. But it tends to that's our core, and we tend to fluctuate between 10 and 50%, I'd say, in terms of increases when we have to.
That's great. And we're talking about this offline a little bit, but what kind of environment do you guys have at the studio, like in terms of aiming for like a fun culture for people to work in, or do you guys have a bunch of beer guzzling gamers, or what kind of personalities do you typically want to try and attract to the studio?
Oh, well, in terms of personalities, we're actually very open, I would say. I'd say one of the key things here is we don't have a really set idea on who that person should be, or what their background should be. I mean, they should be reasonable individuals, and they should have, be somewhat sociable in the sense that, because it's not a huge studio, everybody by nature gets to know one another reasonably well. So I'd say that's normally quite an important element for kind of finding your feet with our studio. But people have come from all kinds of walks who work here, from graduates at top schools to people who are self-taught, people who've switched industries. It's quite it's a varied age group within the studio. So I'd say from a culture perspective, it's really just important that people are committed to what they do. They're committed to always learning and improving themselves, because we will always push people on that. But in terms of where you've come from and what you're about and what you're interested in, we're really open on that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
When it comes to the interest people have, we've got a few people who are well into things like mountain biking and that kind of thing, because the Westby studio is not very far away.
Crazy people, you mean?
Yeah. We've got a few people we've got quite a few gamers, but there's probably as many people who are absolutely crazy over cars as well as games, which obviously helps with the automotive the business. But it's really all walks here. It's just important that people are committed to what they do, that they're good at what they do, and that they are prepared to try and ingratiate themselves into a small to medium sized studio culture.
Yeah, I think it's really critical to have that, because again, you can get the best talent from all over the world, but you need people to be able to function in the same room and want to have a beer after a stressful day, and instead of it being, just strictly on talent alone, where again, in such a creative industry, you're going to get a lot of clashing personalities. So yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. And
family, really, I think.
Yeah.
And the location that we have, because we're out of the big city location, we have artists that come who have done all the jumping around from studio to studio. They want to come and settle down and have their life and just keep pushing themselves forward. So we retain our staff, don't we? And I think that's the benefit. People come and make a life with us, and we've got, such a great little culture, little family, where we've had, how long has the majority of our staff have been with us for over?
Well, that's what I was going to say. There's some of the core people have been here anywhere from 10 to, some of them have been here 20 years. 3 or 4 of them, have been here since Tony set the business up. So wow. You've got people who literally been here as long as the company's been going. So that backbone is always here. Mm-hmm. I think one thing I would add is that we do. One thing some people who've known about us for a while may not know is we actually have 2 studio locations now. We do have another studio in Manchester now, which is in the city centre. So if you have those people who, the main studio is in the countryside, if that's what you want, then you can come here. But we also have one in the city centre in Manchester as well. So for city people who perhaps, I don't know, maybe they're more fresh in their career, or they want somewhere that has a lot more noise, a lot more stuff going on, then we do have that studio that they can work out of as well. So we can actually accommodate on both sides there, I'd say.
Cool. That's great, actually. That's really cool. And you'd mentioned earlier about the with artists like looking to always improve themselves and really kind of pushing that. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. I think I'll start by describing a little bit about what the guys here are like. So, we still have people who work in specialist areas. For example, like we have a lead effects TD, a lead lighting TD as examples, and they major in that area. That's still their specialism. But then you will find that they have advanced skills in other areas as well. So our lighters can final comp shots. our effects guys can find all comp shots as an example. And they tend to be able to do that whole second part of the pipeline. And they're just two examples really. But we do generally tend to find that people who have some kind of generalist background who've then chosen to specialize in an area where that can be their key area, like effects, for example. We find that those people tend to fit best into the studio, just because we do quite big projects here. And so what you'll find is people will work in one area, but then they may be needed to help out in a few other areas and maybe move out of their comfort zone, because that tends to work here as a studio. And we need people who have that willingness to engage with that as and when we need it. So those tend to be some of the best profiles in terms of work fit, in terms of team fit. That doesn't mean that we'll push people down a route if they really don't want to do it. We're not like that. But certainly people who are looking for an opportunity to grow, expand their skills, and certainly those who like to challenge themselves, they do quite well here, because we have an environment that can account for that.
Cool. No, that's great. Yeah, I think it's really critical for artists to kind of start out as generalists, and then, at least my opinion is, to eventually lean into specializing, because I think that we all need to have like one key way to categorize ourselves. But because I've seen some people who go straight into specializing, and as soon as you ask them to do slightly something outside of their comfort zone, it's just like deer in the headlights. And again, like especially when it comes to effects and lighting, which are typically the last two parts of a pipeline before they get into comp, again, you need to know your surrounding areas. So having effects guys who know how to comp and how to light means that you can make your stuff look good and improve on it, but also make sure it kind of matches with how everyone else is working. So yeah, I think it's really critical to have that understanding of where your stuff's coming from and where it's going, so that way you can do that person's job at least a little bit as well.
Well, I think it also areas like lighting, for example, that they are influenced so heavily by the parts that come before lighting. So the integrity of your models, the quality, the work you do on texturing informs and in your shader setup, and how all that comes together. When you're actually adding the lights in the scene, that's kind of the last part of the actual work that you're doing. Basically, there's so much that comes before that, some of which fits into the generalist side of things. So yeah, definitely it has a big impact on, as you say, effects and lighting especially. But that being a medium-sized company, that's also why it's quite important for people to at least have some idea about that.
Yep. Cool. That's great. And what's your opinions about also continuing to learn and improve, like learn new skills as you grow as artists? Do you encourage everyone to continue, even like, let's say 5, 10, 15 years into the industry, continue to seek out training and do courses or tutorials, things to improve their skills and grow?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's when it comes to that, there's many ways to skin a cat, I would say, but it's important that they do keep themselves up to date, because technology does change, and as the technology changes, it brings in new workflows and techniques, which probably makes things faster or makes them look better, or normally a combination of the two. And you normally have to keep on top of that then, because if you're not keeping on top of it, you can be sure that your competitors are.
That's
so
right.
I think it's some people see it as a great learning thing to be constantly doing. Some people see it as a necessary evil, or a combination of the two. But it is important to stay on top of the game, so to speak, because this industry is always moving. It's never longer than 4 or 5 years in any given area before there is a new workflow, a new package, a new system to take advantage of. How that happens, there's a lot of varied ways that can do it. A lot of our guys are quite proactive on that, who've been here a while. They will pick up and self-teach, or even introduce to the company some things that they are very keen on. Mm-hmm. We have regular appraisals, and the specific areas where we ask people, where do you want to move into? What kind of training do you want to have? Where do you want your career to go next, basically? So if they don't think to ask the question, worst case scenario, appraisal comes around and we do ask them that question, so they have a direct opportunity to highlight that. And they're not closed either. The questions are open. So people have an opportunity to state what they would like. They're not given a limited choice or anything like that. I'm not saying we can promise anything. Somebody comes around and says, yeah, I'd like 150 grand, please. Guarantee we, can't necessarily promise everything, but where we can, we will give people the training or, project exposure or, going to an event that they think will be useful for them. It's open, so it's
great.
It's an opportunity for people to come to us and express what they think is going to be good for them moving forwards, technically or otherwise.
Cool, no, that's great. And one question I had kind of related to that as well was just about like scripting and things like that. Do you think that for, let's say, effects or more of those technical roles, do you think that it's beneficial or favorable that artists coming in have at least some kind of scripting ability?
It never hurts. It certainly never hurts, because there's always areas where people can help the pipeline and the workflow in that sense. So anyone who knows Python, or we use MaxScript in our studio, so anyone who is a Max user who's done any MaxScript, it's really beneficial for us because we do some pretty advanced stuff under the hood in Max. Mm-hmm. So naturally, it can be very, very handy if somebody has an idea for a way to improve a workflow and they've scripted something. Anything that helps in a practical production basis. Or automate some of the more laborious duties, so allowing the artist to do the good stuff, so to speak. Yep. That is always handy. So it's never going to hurt. By the same point in time, it's also not everyone's cup of tea. So what I would say is anybody who wants to explore it, by all means do so. If you find it suits you, then you have a skill set that is in real high demand. But it doesn't always suit everybody in terms of scripting and like tool design and development and that kind of thing.
Cool. A lot of our artists have actually started taking on board to learn a bit of code themselves, haven't they? Just to tidy it up.
I certainly know the effects and lighting guys. I know James has done quite a lot of it in Python and stuff.
So quite a few people have kind of taken it on board themselves to start learning a bit of code and implement some stuff that makes them and other people quicker.
Another example, I was just going to say, where, almost by, I don't know if you'd say osmosis, I don't know if that's the right word, but, a few people learned some scripting. We have pipeline TDs here, but now, the artists are like, well, I'll see if I can figure this out myself. And, it's probably, well, by the sounds of it, half our artists are doing it now, more than I realised actually. But that's a factor that can happen here, where people normally will jump into other areas, and not only you're actively encouraged to do that, explore anything that you think is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's a really critical and beneficial thing to have because, again, as you mentioned, you can automate a lot of what you do, and I think that a lot of artists tend to kind of run for the hills when they think of scripting or coding or things like that because they think that you need to know math and do all these things, but there's different ways to approach everything, and it isn't really that hard to pick up. But if it means that some tasks that you're stuck with that might take hours or days to do, that you can just quickly spend 30 minutes writing something and then have it not only do the thing for you, but then for the rest of your life, you got something that you can kind of change a little bit and have it as an extra button to, to work with. Then it's definitely beneficial.
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can certainly be good. I mean, I have spoken to a lot of artists sometimes who have tried that, and they, when it comes to actual scripting, they just can't get their head around the essence of coding. It just isn't them. But at the same time, you get some other ones who can do it in a visual system. So when they use node-based systems, like for example, some artists have really struggled with things like Substance Designer, not because it's necessarily a difficult program to learn, but it has a very, very different way of how you create your artwork in the end. You're not painting anything per se in, for example, Substance Designer. You are using noise and pattern generators, and then you're feeding those through nodes that have an effect, like they'll make it more wavy, or they'll transform it in some way, in up, down, or left and right. And then you start with a base color, but there's all kinds of things that you can put into it to then get your maps at the end. And it's just a different way. I'm using that as an example, by the way, but it's just a different way of thinking how to put it all together. And some people take to that very quickly. And there's lots of stuff you can do with that as well. Things like Houdini and Yuka are graph and node based as well. So if you crack that kind of stuff, then you're normally pretty good in those packages as well.
Yep, no, exactly. It's just a different mindset. And just to touch on that as well, like what software do you guys use typically at the studio?
Yeah, so the backbone of our pipeline is Max, V-Ray, and Nuke. Texturing is a combination of Mari for hero assets and Substance Painter for a number of other things. And we use ZBrush for our sculpting stuff. They tend, I mean, there's other packages that we use as well, but that tends to be the core of the pipeline. I mean, Photoshop, of course, is used for a lot of different things, like, anything we want to design, concept, and that kind of stuff. But that tends to be the core packages that we engage with.
Cool, that's great. And just kind of moving into more of the discussion about hiring and staffing, because again, I think that a lot of people might be a bit oblivious as to, okay, I send in my reel and then I get the job, right? And so just talking about that a little bit, like let's say discipline-wise, are there any specific disciplines that you find are in, let's say, high demand but low supply? Like it's very hard to find like rock-solid people, but you're typically always looking for them. In other words, it might be a safe area that people might want to lean into a bit more, knowing that, hey, if I do this, then let's say rigging and character TD work. There's obviously work out there, but it's not going to be typically there's only going to be like one or two people at a studio doing that. Whereas let's say lighting or effects or comp might mean that there's plenty more opportunities in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying it does really depend on the type of role, as you say. But I'll run some ones that we find more challenging than others. So finding good pipeline TDs can be challenging. The main reason really is that we are light blur and unit image. We are a Mac studio. So you'll normally find that people have got the shotgun, they've got the Python, they've got the tools development and that kind of thing. But we do also do some pretty nifty stuff with MaxScript here as well. So it's always good for our pipeline people to know that language, and that's kind of a rarity. But in terms of lighting, finishers, compositors, that can also be tricky, but for a slightly different reason. So I would actually say now, because there's the last few years have been a lot more people encouraged to go into the lighting and finishing part of the pipeline, for example. And in terms of numbers, you can always find a lighter who can come and work with you. You can't always find someone who's the quality though, or has the eye, or they've had the right level of exposure to do the work that you need them to do. And that's where it can sometimes get tricky, because the quality for some artists, it really can vary quite a lot for a wide variety of reasons, from what their eye is like, to how committed they are, to the training they've had, to the project exposure they've had. It can all be really varied. But you've got a lot of lighters and compers out there, but finding the good ones, or finding ones that have skills commensurate with the kind of product that we put out, can be challenging as well. Again, just because when you get to that higher bar, the numbers do start to dwindle.
Yep, exactly. And
so that's challenging, but that offers an opportunity for people who would look to go into those areas. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about this later, but a big thing around this is people normally have a good idea of what they need to do. It's actually, I find a lot of it is real drive, the whole 5% inspiration, 95% perspiration. I think there's a lot of people who just need to work through that, and realize that to get that first really good piece, you're going to do 10, 15, 20 pieces which aren't quite there until you hit it. But once you hit it, you can then hit it every time,
Yeah, no, I think that's great. In fact, I've never heard that before. So 5% inspiration, 95% perspiration.
Yeah, well, it's I can't claim it myself. Okay, but it's that old adage of like people will have an idea on what they have to do, and then it is a case of every time you do it, even if you find it's not quite where you wanted it to be, whatever your level is, junior, experienced, whatever, even if it doesn't quite hit there, you will take a few steps forward. You will learn some things that were better last time, and it's just about building on top of that each and every time. I mean, I'm sure the guys here did it as a studio as well. It's just that constant push and commitment to learning to improve yourself every time, I think, which is more of a mindset, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, it's that discipline that a lot of people tend to think, once they get into a job, then it's like, okay, cool. Now I've arrived. I can just kind of kick back and do my thing instead of like constantly trying to improve and better yourself. So it's a good mindset to have.
That I think, I came from games, and that could certainly be a problem there, where it will be okay for a while, but if there's no effort to try and keep yourself up to date in some degree, unfortunately, you can find yourself getting left behind, and then it's an even bigger jump to kind of learn. It's as we said before about learning the latest techniques, knowing what the latest software is doing, and whether it's professional or personal. Like for us, for example, we don't really judge where the work has come from, whether it's your own or whether it's pro work. We just need to see the quality wherever it's come from. As long as we see that quality, that's what we would judge you on. For example, I mean, we often say here, education is very important to us, as is experience. We do value them very, very highly, but it's still number one thing before we look at anything else is the show reel or the images that you send us. That still takes the number one slot. Certainly on that first judgment, anyway.
Absolutely, because it's proof of what you can do. So, I mean, you could be the nicest guy in the world or girl and have all the right credentials, but if the quality of output that you're able to demonstrate isn't that high, then that's what really matters in the end. Is like, can you sit down tomorrow and do the work at a desk?
Or even just even if we can see potential, we will build on that. I mean, I guess we've segued a little bit here, but one interesting thing I would say is that sometimes we really like seeing personal work, whether it's junior or a senior person, simply because even if it doesn't look as strong as, let's say, I don't know, the latest Star Wars movie or something, we know that piece is all you. We know that everything that is in it is everything that you have created yourself, that you built yourself, you've gone through the challenges yourself, all of that. Really, really easy to decipher from that. Okay, here's where this person can contribute, and here's where they can't necessarily. I mean, one example I'll use on that is that we sometimes get effects artists who send in reels where they've done some of their own work at home and haven't necessarily completely finished the whole thing, but you will be able to see their sims and stuff that they're doing in Houdini, and it's really great because our effects guys can look at it and they can think, I can see just from those images and the different passes that they've sent through, I can really clearly see how they would have set that up, how complex it would have been, what kind of challenges they would have faced on it. So they can build a really clear picture from that kind of stuff. That actually gives you, that actually works quite well with the team here. It's something that they value quite highly. So personal work is always worth doing with these guys, especially on effects and lighting. Just thought it was worth mentioning. If there's anyone out there who's listening, that tends to go quite a long way with us.
Yeah, no, it's like something that I completely agree with, because again, it's kind of interesting when you're going through the hiring process, but you've always got to think about, well, what was the percentage of supervisor, influencing this? Did it take 99 revisions to get to where it was, or what? But when it comes to your own work, like it's very clear, like you did everything, so you're responsible for the final output, and there's no other outside influences. So it makes it very clear about like what your capabilities are.
Yeah, I mean, our guys, they do, we always expect to go a few rounds with something to get it where it needs to be, and it's obviously that combination. But it's you're never really going to. Well, if you do get it first time, then it's amazing. But there's always going to be a few rounds of feedback. But as you say, yeah, it gets to that point where when you look at work that people have done themselves, you can probably judge. Right, is it going to take 3 or 4 rounds to get this perfect, or is it going to take 9 or 10? And is 9 or 10, can we afford the impact of time that we'll have, for example, on a project? And that, that's where some of the more practical aspects of it, do need to come in, of course, because it's a project-based business. But yeah, I mean, a few of our guys have also moved into other areas just by actually doing it internally as well. One person who did that is we've got a character artist here, Dave Weaver, who he started in automotive and was really passionate about character modeling and development. And did a few different pieces, and the guys here, the idea was, let's see how good it is, let's see what you can do, and if it hits the buy, you're in, and that's exactly what happened.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. And I guess just to talk a little bit about like the hiring process, again, I think that a lot of people are a bit oblivious as to, hey, I'm going to cut a reel, I'm going to send it in, and then I'm going to get a job 2 days later. And do you want to talk a little bit about like both how to apply, let's say, at real time, and whether it's online job application or what are the best ways, but also what happens with your reel, whether it is that it gets sent in, and if it's good, then it gets archived, and then when it's time to hire, that's when they get pulled out in a big Excel spreadsheet of all the artists' work? Or do you guys typically review everything right away and then hire on the spot, or what can people expect?
Well, again, it's a mix of everything. I mean, to be honest with you, we get people from all kinds of sources. We do get people coming to our site. We do get traffic from there. We get it from our social media channels, and we're also proactive with talent scouting as well. So you will have us going to people that we actively think will be great matches or potentially great matches for our studio, and that also includes events as well. Like when we last met at It's Art Mag, I think it was that over a year already?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. But that's a great example of an event where we would look to meet junior to senior talent and just find out what's out there and introduce ourselves to individuals who we think could be interesting. So there's lots of ways that people can get in touch with us, can apply to us. It can be through the website. If you don't see a job ad which necessarily exactly matches what your skills are, nothing is stopping you sending something in speculatively, and quite a few people do. We always look at them, and I think our hit ratio for getting back to people is pretty strong as well. I'm sure we're at something like 90-95%. Even if somebody isn't right, we will let them know, and we do make every effort to give people good feedback as to why they are or are not being considered. So that no matter what level you're at, you're walking away with something tangible where you can look at it and think, that's why I wasn't considered there. And there's also a couple of points about what may give that a different outcome as well, Mm-hmm. I mean, we are honest, we're respectful, but we are honest if we think you're quite close or if we think you've got quite a bit of distance to go. But again, that's useful for people because they get something tangible that they can work from as well. It's useful feedback, even if it's quite critical in some ways.
You need that.
Sorry?
You need that, though. I think it's really critical that that you do get that. Otherwise, like, if someone keeps telling you that you're almost there and you're not, then I think the hard truth helps you kind of say, okay, well, I'm going to make some big changes and and really work on myself, rather than like, okay, I just got to like make some more pieces and send them all in and kind of follow the same pattern. So I think that the more honest people are with artists, especially early in their career, the bigger favor you're doing them in the long run.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you've said that, because I have had discussions with other hiring managers, recruiters, HR people, MDs at other studios, where they normally just like to give a stock response, and they even sometimes say, well, we don't really want to offend anybody, and we're like, if you're, you can give constructive criticism without being offensive. You can do that, but if somebody has either sunk thousands of hours in, and whether it's thousands of hours of self-teaching or it's 30, 40, 50,000 pounds or dollars or whatever on an education, then we really are doing a disservice to the next generation of talent that's coming through if they're not quite there. It's up to them to do something with it, of course, but if we're not even going to give it to them, how are they ever going to improve? And I think it's pretty bad when we don't make that investment and put that effort in, because we need that next generation of pipeline TDs, artists, producers, whatever really. We need those people coming through.
Yeah, no, I think it's great because, again, I want to tell people what I want, because that way they're going to work closer to being a valid resource that I can then hire. So, again, it works in your favor to tell them what they need to do, so that way you can take advantage of them. And do you find that there's any like common red flags, I guess, when it comes to hiring artists? And this is, I guess, more either just common mistakes with applicants when they send their work in, or let's say when they get to the interview process, like, common things that come up a lot that usually cost people the job. Because I think it's it can be a pretty general question, but there are going to be those times that people come in, they start trash talking their previous employer, or just common things that people aren't even aware that they're doing, but it's usually the thing that went from, great, you're a shoo-in to you're on the blacklist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. There are some things that people can do. I mean, yeah, trash talking your past employer doesn't look great. I mean, again, it's a whole professional criticism thing. I mean, if you're looking for a new job, then normally there is a challenge at the previous one. It might be a simple one, like, the commute's too far, and it may be something like, you are just not gelling with the hiring manager that you're, or the lead artist or whatever that you're working with. Those things do happen, and we understand those things happen. So I think it's okay to be honest. I think it's all in how you present it as well, and that's just keeping a certain air of professionalism about it. Again, it's okay to be critical about something as long as you do it professionally, and you don't go into you don't become ranty, basically. Because that normally informs us as how you're going to be here. And listen, nobody's perfect. People can get angry at stuff here. People can be, disappointed with something or whatever. Nobody's perfect. But if that's your first impression and you can't control it very well, then chances are when you're working with us, that's going to be somewhat amplified when you've got your feet under the table, so to speak. And there's only so much of that you can cushion or handle, really. If you had a team full of aggressive or very, very highly emotional people, it can obviously become difficult for obvious reasons. So I think the other thing as well is one of the key things I'd say with an application is just get some of the basics right. So let us know, what you are, what your job is with a couple of bullet points about, what you feel your key skills are and what you can most offer to a studio. So, for example, saying where you're best at. So again, you might have a generalist who may come in and just say, I'm actually pretty good with some technical art skills. I'm pretty good at, writing, shader writing. I can do pretty good shader setups. I'm pretty good with texturing. I've also got some rigging skills. I think those are my key skills. It can be a mix of things as long as you're clear to us about what it is you can do, and they can bullet point that in a CV. Where it draws our eye to those key areas. So that's one big thing that can help. Let us know where you want to go. What's your objective? It can be one line. It can be simple. It might just be work on kick-ass stuff. That's fine. But somebody else might have different ambitions about. I
CEO.
Yeah.
Sorry. I would love to hear that one day. Sorry.
So if they're good, they'll still get in. But,
cool, I like it.
But yeah, honestly, just let us know where you want to go so we have an idea on that. And also, again, it sounds obvious, but some people still forget to just link the show reel. So just have a clear link to where that is, whether it's an ArtStation page, Vimeo page, your own personal Squarespace that you've built or something like that. It can be whatever it is. Just make sure there's a clear link to it. And on the folio side of things, because I know we didn't answer this earlier, to get back to it, it's simple but effective advice as well. Just put your best stuff on there. I mean, okay, maybe you don't just want to put one image on there. For example, if you're a 3D environment artist, as an example, but just put your top several pieces there. If you've even got that many, because you can have older ones in there, and it will beef up the portfolio. And a lot of hiring managers may look at it and think that. They may think, oh, well, that works from 3 years ago, and they'll probably think it looks a bit bare, so I'll forgive them that. But you're still running a huge risk of people looking at it and thinking, I don't know for sure why those older pieces are in there, or these pieces that don't look as good as what this person posted last week. You're just leaving them. You're leaving the ability for them to question what your eye is like, and it's an unnecessary risk, because we would sooner take somebody who had 3 kick-ass images than somebody who had 30 images and 3 of them were good. For example, they might even be on a par, but you got the guy or the person rather, who knows how to trim their show reel to show their best stuff, and you got the person who has some really good stuff in there but keeps all the other fluff in.
Yeah.
It doesn't always make sense, and so it's just not something that shows you in as good a possible light as it could do, really. So simple advice, but very effective, and not enough people do it. I think still, just don't be afraid to put your best stuff in there.
I think that a lot of people don't realize how volatile the whole review process is, and the fact is that you've got 20, 30 people applying for maybe one or two positions. And I think the mindset that most people go through is like, oh, I'll add this piece in because like I worked really hard on it and my mom said that they loved it. And they don't really think about the fact that like all it takes is one or two bad shots to disqualify you, because when you have a big list of people to go through and look at their reels, and you're right, like there is one where it's just like, why is that on there? Then you start to question like, is this something that you consider good? And is this what the level of output that you're willing to do for us? Because if it is, then if anything, it's communicating that I'm willing to let this slide. Like this is the level of quality I'm willing to let slide on a production job as well. So, less is always more.
Very much so, yeah. Very much so. I mean, we have, it's probably worthwhile saying as well now that, and I might send you the link to this, but we have a little article on our website as well where we actually talk about, you want a job at Realtime UK, here's a few pointers. And it talks about, what we'd look to see in the resume or the CV, or as some people have sent through, a PDF picture where they've done something creative with it. All of it's fine as long as we get the information that we need. It has information about what we like to see in the show reel. And we also talk as well about the interview process and what we're like as a studio as well. And I think we've got some good information in there. And we try and keep it quite inviting, casualish basically, so that people can absorb that information. And we did the same thing actually with, it's probably worth mentioning the Reddit Ask Me Anything as well, where we had, we had people following this article that we published. We had people getting in contact with us on Reddit to ask us questions. And many of the questions reflect things that you'd mentioned. One of the key ones, people being, I have been applying forever and I don't hear back from anyone, nothing that's any use, what gives? And we actually try, it's probably worth linking that as well, because we do try and break that down as to, look, here's what's probably going on. Maybe they don't have time to give the proper feedback, or some of them are too afraid to do it because they're afraid of, they don't want to risk being offensive by saying, I think some of the work is just not good, or it's just not where it needs to be. But as we've established earlier, I think it's worse to not say anything and still not hire that person. And then that individual has nothing to go on and has sunk a ton of money into their education or time, maybe years of their life, and they're getting nothing back from it. Mm-hmm. No, we need to do better than that, I think.
No, I think that's great of you to do that, because honestly, everyone needs it. And like you're doing everyone a disservice by keeping your mouth shut.
It's good for brand though as well, because when you do, when you make some kind of investment in there, you increase your chance of people coming back and just saying, that was really good. I've tried to improve. What do you think? And if you're providing that feedback, some of them will come back to you 3 or 4 times and they will improve and get to the level that you need. And, there have been people who've been hired into the studio who have shown that perseverance, or they've been even just proving they're able to take on some of the feedback and implement it, because that feeds into the whole rounds of it as well. The hiring managers will notice that here. They'll look at it and think, okay, it's still not quite there, but this animator's improved. They're showing more of the fundamentals. Their weighting's better, their timing's better, posing is definitely improved, but they've still got some issues with some of the other things. For example, there's some jitteriness. Whatever the feedback is, the point is that they will look at it, they will notice it, and if you have those significant steps in improvement each and every time, the hiring managers here do notice, because good people, you've got a lot of people who want work in CG, but good people are always hard to find, and those are the ones that we're always after. So yeah, it's definitely worth considering if anyone's thinking of wanting to join the studio. We will engage with you on that process.
I think that's actually brilliant that you mentioned that, because you're right. Like, in a way, it works as a filtration system, because especially when you get juniors, the ones who you're able to say, hey, you know what, like, come back in 6 months, work on these things, or even 3 months, and keep us in the loop, but do these things and work towards that, and then we'll be interested in hiring you. And then automatically, the ones who actually do say, hey, I did everything you said, here's a new reel, what do you guys think? It's showcasing that they're the ones with the incentive. They're the ones who are actually determined and follow through on things. And at the same time, like, not only does it help you say, okay, these are actually good candidates because they're the ones who actually listened and applied what we said exactly how we would in a real production environment. But on the other side, for the applicants, this is actually a great chance to actually build that relationship, because when you have 20, 30 people sending cold reels in, like cold emails saying, hey, I want a job there, this is a chance for you to stand out and start to build that long-term relationship, which would eventually lead to a job.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it also helps with that cultural aspect as well, where we think, how well can this person take feedback as well? I mean, even in some cases, some people have haggled the case or argued the case on some things, and they've made good arguments. So we've been open to that and think, okay, well, I see where you're coming from, and yeah, that's interesting, So again, it's that whole engagement, and then just seeing where it goes. Even if it doesn't amount to anything, we had our academy last year, and it's worth mentioning that we run an academy where we hire juniors each year, but we won't just hire juniors. A number of people kind of have this internship experience as well, where they do quite a demanding task in the studio and cover a lot of different areas in the pipeline. And we had we hired a couple of people through it last year, and one of the people that we worked with, and all 4 students we had last year were brilliant. They were all hireable, but we only had 2 positions to give, unfortunately. And one of them, again, very, very good. And the experience he got here, he was able to take to another studio. But even though he found it quite challenging and stressful sometimes, he had mentioned to a few of the students, he said, that was actually a really good internship because I actually learned quite a lot on it. I was tested on it, but I moved in areas like I'd only ever modelled, and now I was doing proper scene development. I was framing shots and that kind of thing. I was also compositing, and did this. I learned new skills on it, and then that led to a few of the students saying, even if you don't have any jobs, this internship could be quite interesting because they were really complimentary about this, and it proved to us as well. We thought. I think some people worried it might be a little bit too demanding, but people walked away with tangible stuff that they could use from it, basically. So
that's awesome. Cool. No, I think it's great because you're pushing everyone, to really get their best self. I've got like 1-2 more questions I just want to ask, but one I think would be very valuable for a lot of people is, let's say that you're not in the UK or you don't have any work permits, how do you guys typically handle that? Is there any right way or wrong way to, let's say, approach you guys about relocating and just kind of communicating that you might need work permit?
Well, I mean, there's kind of no wrong way to do it. I mean, it's people either need a visa to work with us or they don't. And one thing I will start by saying is, Realtime UK do support work visas for people who come outside of the UK or EU, and we have people working with us who have come through that process. It's more a question of practicality, which really comes down to, are we able to get one, which changes, it's a case-by-case basis, based on rules not set by us, of course. A lot of it is based on what job you do and if you're on a skills shortage list that's in the UK. Some of it is based by what your base salary would be, as in our government here have put a minimum. Anybody below that salary, for example, just won't be allowed one. And level of spoken English has to be at a certain level. These are things you can find on, there is a page on immigration on www.gov.uk, which you can have a look at. And that's one of the best places to get information, because all companies that do visas, they're not our own rules. We're working to rules set by the government. There's very much one which is about practicality.
It's something that we help through the whole process. We don't expect people to go and get their own visas. We do it here for them.
No, yeah, definitely. So it's if we do, we will kind of do pre-checks to see if we've got you never guaranteed it, but we'll check to see if we've got we've got a good chance of getting a visa for somebody, and then we will assist the individual by pointing them in the right direction of what they should be looking for. Checking in with them, seeing how they're getting on their side of the process. There's obviously an employer side which we handle and pay for ourselves and that kind of thing, but we do also assist individuals with the visa administration and the costs and that kind of thing that are involved. While we can assist though and provide advice, we can't do their side of the application for them. It's something that it's something that the employee would have to do. But we can talk them through our experience and where they need to be looking and what things they need to be considering. For example, anyone who's coming into the country from outside of the EU, they will need to have some kind of certificate from IELTS, which is a body which is recognised by the UK and covers your spoken English and that kind of thing, which is not normally too hard to get if you've got a certain level, but that's just like one of a million things that you need to cover in the process. So
cool. And just for anyone listening, episode 109 actually interviewed one of the top immigration lawyers in the UK who does specialist visas on the whole visa process and how to acquire work papers. And yeah, I think it's really cool. Like, do you think that there's anything ahead of time that artists can do or start thinking about now? Because again, I think that most people don't ever think about like, hey, maybe I should start, let's say, keeping all of my awards and any paperwork or other things that are going to help me with the future applications until they actually get to that point. Then it's like, great, now I've got to backpedal through decades of work to try and collect it all. So having a paper trail, I guess, of accolades and things like that, anything to prove that you are a specialist in your field, to so that way when the time comes, you can just drop it all on a lawyer's desk and say, great, let's get this started.
Well, I think what I would say to this is I can give a few tips on things that we've noticed have worked well in the last couple of years. I will start by saying, we're not immigration lawyer specialists. We've had to work with a specialist solicitor on certain aspects because the law is changing every year. Terms do change, and I wouldn't want to. It's always best that people check what's happening. Paperwork that you needed one year, you may not need the next year. But some key things that tend to come through is always check the skills shortage list, which is available on the government website. Currently, people who work in the CG field, like CG artists, programmers, pipeline TDs, computer animators. I know those jobs are on that list, so that gives you an immediate leg up. So just working currently in that industry does help you a lot. Education certificates is worth keeping because they'd be handy, but also having some funds as well is important. There will be some outlay costs that you'll be required for paying for certain paperwork and visas and that kind of thing. And one key thing in the UK now is that anybody coming into the UK from outside the EU has to pay an NHS surcharge, which is £200 every year on your visa. So if you're coming into the UK, let's say on a 3-year visa, that would be £600 for yourself, which you have to pay up front because we have a national health service here where no matter what happens to you, you will be cared for. You will get the best. You'll get very, very good care in this country. But people need to make some kind of contribution to it. And if you have a family coming with you, whether you have a partner and a child, for example, you would have to pay the same amount of money for them as well. Again, it's something that we can look at helping people with, but in the initial stage, you still need to have those funds to pay to the government before they let you come in. So.
Right, that's good to know. Cool. And
some other things, but I think it's its own subject if we start going into the details. And I'm just very mindful that we're specialists to help keep us on top of it. And every application is different, but those are a few key things which I think are safe to mention.
Absolutely. No, it's good advice, and it's definitely a much bigger conversation too. I guess I have one or two more questions. This one I think is not that relevant, but even in the past week, I've gotten 3 people asking me about like, hey, I'm, let's say 40, 45 years old, and I want to change careers into visual effects, let's say. But I think it's a very common thing that they're worried about whether age is going to be a factor in them getting work. So I figured while I'm talking to you, it might be good to clarify this about whether age is at all a factor when it comes to hiring or working in this field.
It's not a consideration for us, and it's not anything that we base a decision on. I mean, in one sense, somebody comes with after career change and they've got more life experience, that can have its own benefits. They might be able to, might be more realistic in expectations. They might handle stress better. But again, we don't really kind of get ageist like that. It's still the same things still apply, which is, the skill level that you exhibit to the studio, what you're able to do with us, your understanding of the packages that we have. It's the same as we talked about earlier, really. Again, showreel is king. They've got a really great showreel. We'll speak to them.
Even if you look like Gandalf. No, I think it's such a trivial thing, but I'm just surprised.
So, again, culture fit.
That's great. Yeah, and you're right. Like, it's all about just being able to do the work, because I mean, it's a service-based industry. So all everyone's doing is they're hiring people to tick a box and get the work done, make sure that everyone else is happy and they fit in with the environment. But that's what should matter, not anything kind of more trivial like that. But I figured I'd ask just because, again, I'm just kind of shocked even this week how many times that's come up. And I also get that when people are transitioning later in their career, it's obviously you've got a lot more at risk than you do when you're 18, and it's just like, yeah, I'm going to try this for a couple of years and see how it works, because you've got life responsibilities as well. So I think it's just more about making sure the transition's seamless and you're at the right level to be able to take the career plunge and do something different.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's all kinds of circumstances, I guess that people can have in terms of when they're transitioning, and every case is different, isn't it? But we do, it's not something we would base any judgment on. If somebody's got the work quality and the right culture fit as well, because in terms of your personality and fitting in with us, that's every bit as important. But if there's a match there, then again, you've got a good artist, or you've got a good person, a good producer, a good a good operations person, whoever it is, we would always bring them into a studio. And I don't know why. Tell you what this has reminded me of. It's always reminded me of a designer who worked at Bethesda, who worked on Oblivion, and then later worked on Kingdoms of Amalur. And everyone knows how big a game Oblivion was, but he was in his 60s when he was lead designer on that game.
Wow.
That's Elder Scrolls. So again, you never can tell. So
cool. And one final question I have is just more pertaining to juniors, but I think, again, because a lot of people when they first start out, they're, as you kind of hinted at before as well, I think that when you've got a bit more experience in life, you're a bit more grounded. And, very early on, especially when you're younger, you're wanting to get into visual effects and want to do a lot. And you mightn't really be aware of what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. And do you find that hiring juniors, like, are there any major concerns that typically you're kind of looking out for when going through that process?
Well, only in the sense that we know that they don't have the industry experience, and again, it's like the seniors, juniors very much have their place in the studio here, I would say. So not any better or worse, but just differently in terms of naturally. There's a time of the year, for example, that we take on juniors for really two reasons, but one driven by the other. So naturally, more often than not, like say, you don't have to come from an educational institution. It's naturally very good if you come from great schools and that kind of thing, but it's not an absolute prerequisite. But because most of them do normally have a formal education, we tend to get them around the summer. And so what has happened is, in our schedule, we tend to have time for hiring juniors around the summer. And we've had the academy around the summer, which, so all those things mesh together schedule-wise. But the major consideration really is just, first of all, what are we looking for? And you tend to get a bit more generalist work from students, which, is understandable because they're finding their feet in the industry and they should try a few different things. Although some are, people are getting a bit more specialised when they come out now, which I can touch on in a moment. But generally speaking, it's just having a look at the work, seeing what the quality is like, seeing who they would work with, how we could fit them in, and also considering how much investment time they would need. But we do like working with juniors because you've certainly got lots of passion there. They're normally open to a lot of different areas, so it's possible for them to work in a few different areas and find a specialism which will fit them and also fit you. We've had plenty of people who have joined us over time and become specialists in a particular area, and also they've developed to be very good real-time people as well, because our guys tend to flip from within a few different areas. People are really multi-talented here, so juniors sometimes can be quite good at making that mold, making that fit. So again, it sounds like a boring answer, but normally, we're hiring during the summer. Let's see the work you've got. Let's look at the roles that we've got at the moment, and let's see how close a match that is. But we're proactive in that kind of searching, because we've been going around a few universities the last couple of months, ahead of the 3 hires that we're going to make this late summer. And I've got a graduation jury in 48 hours actually. Going to be going out to, which I think we talked about last week. So yeah, we're looking for a junior effects artist, junior lighter, and a junior generalist. Ideally with some Unreal Engine knowledge as well, Unreal Engine 4. So
cool.
So if there's any juniors with those skills listening, then now is a real good time to get in touch.
That's great. That's really cool. Awesome. And is there anything you guys want to add?
We're actually going to be at SIGGRAPH this year. When is that? So that's going to be in August. So middle of August, we're going to have some guys down there actually. So if anybody wants to meet us at SIGGRAPH, then yeah, we'd love to grab a coffee and say hello.
I'll grab a beer.
Yeah. What am I talking about? Well, Stu loves to have a beer, so you can meet with him, our art director, Stu Bayley, because he's actually given a talk there as well.
Great.
So anyone, he's done a few talks recently, and he's really good with that, talking about his artistic process, how he develops things in storytelling, in trailers and that kind of thing. So he's done a few of them now. They're pretty good for anyone who's interested in that area.
Cool. This has been a lot of fun, and again, like a lot of really great insights you guys have shared, because I think that, as I mentioned before, a lot of artists aren't too well versed in what to expect when applying for work, and I think that you've given a lot of really critical advice that can help people kind of make sure that they hit the ground running and send in their ideal application.
Yeah, people can always get in touch as well if they wanted to learn any more. I will say, we are pretty busy with a lot of things at the moment. So if people do get in touch with us and they don't hear anything back straight away, we haven't forgotten about you. We will get back eventually, but just give us a little bit of time at the moment. But yeah, anything that helps. And also don't forget, like I say, on our website, and let me know if you need me to send you links on that, Alan. But
definitely,
I can send a link to the article that we have on
the AMA.
On our job site and the AMA as well, so people can look at some questions there, and then look at some of the questions that were asked and look at some of the answers. So yeah, anything that they can gain from that, really.
Yeah, this has been really great. Thank you again, guys. I appreciate your time.
No worries. Yeah, it's been great speaking with you too, Alan. Thanks a lot for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that episode. Again, I want to thank Pete Leonard for taking the time out to chat. And next episode, I'm going to be back with more demo reel content. Okay, so at the moment, one of the things that I frequently look at is if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it to death. So in other words, right now, next episode is another one focused around demo reels, because again, I want to just really hit this subject and flesh it out as much as possible. So the next 2 episodes are going to be all the types of demo reels that there are. So in other words, initially you might think, well, I'm going to make a demo reel and that's going to get me jobs. But when we start to get into the strategies of it all, and even later on, like let's say that you get to a point where you're now a VFX supervisor way down the line, what kind of demo reel are you going to make then? And let's say if you're a studio, what kind of reels are you going to make there? Let's say if you're freelancing, let's say you're working from home, let's say that you're trying to change into a different discipline. So I'm going to outline all the different types of reels and how to use them as best possible to be able to land and communicate the right kind of jobs that you want to get. And then finally, after that, the other one is going to be more specifically around getting your reel in front of the right people. So we get into a lot of advanced tactics, very focused on YouTube, how to get your videos ranked really high, as well as just a lot of tactics around that. So I think this one's going to be really valuable no matter what you're doing. It's going to go beyond just demo reels, but we're going to get into a lot of virality and other tactics all on this subject. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Beyond that, we're going to be shifting gears a little bit and doing some really cool stuff. But like I said, I wanted to just hammer out everything to do with demo reels into one really epic kind of phase of this podcast, and then we're going to shift gears and tackle different subjects as we go. So this way I think that you can kind of just find that sequence of episodes and just hammer them out one after another and apply it to what you're doing, like a course, like lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. But beyond that, like I said, we're going to shift gears into different subjects. One of the key ones that I'm really looking forward to is how to get started in the industry, and later on how to change careers from different career that you might be in into visual effects, but how to launch your own studio and all the steps around business. So there's going to be so many different things. It's going to be really cool. On top of that, I've got some really great interviews coming up with everyone from the person who created Jar Jar Binks is definitely one of the big ones that I'm excited to put out. I got a lot of really great episodes coming out, and I'll announce all of them soon. So huge roadmap of episodes, as well as other cool stuff. But like I said, if you go to alanmckay.com, there's so many great resources out there at the moment. I'm going to continue to be updating that every single week with new videos, new articles, tutorials, everything. One thing I'm going to throw out there as well is that I have a new free training series I'm working on pretty soon, and that's going to be around Venom. Why Venom? Because I've had hundreds of people ask me to do one on Venom. And this is your chance if you want to email me any ideas around this, because for once, I know the topic, but I don't actually have the exact idea of what I want to do. And this is a chance for you to say, Alan, it'd be really cool if you did this or whatever, because obviously it's going to be the symbiote suit and something around that, but I got to figure it out. I've got a lot of ideas that are sequences, but to do, let's say, 1 or 2 shots, because I want to keep this pretty easy to follow. That's where I'm kind of still struggling a little bit to come up with the right idea. So any ideas around the whole Venom symbiote suit and like the type of effect or shot to do, let me know, because I'm about to start planning this out, scheduling it, hiring talent to do the actual shot or sequence, and have that all happening, so that way very soon I can put out some training around it. So this is your chance to submit ideas and give me your take on what you think would be really cool, and maybe I'll actually go out and do it. Okay, so shoot me an email, amckay@alanmckay.com, or just go to my website. All my contact information is there. All right, so I will leave it there. I'll be back next episode. Until then, rock on.